Thousands of anti-shutdown protesters descended on a California town demanding Governor Gavin Newsom open things back up. Between 2,500 and 3,000 anti-lockdown protesters assembled on the boardwalk at Huntington Beach Friday. And Huntington Beach, as far as I can tell right now, is a Republican +4 district. Not surprising. We're seeing a very, very weird, strange tribal view of what's going on with the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of the worst hit locations in the country, democratically controlled cities. And some of the safest and less, infected areas, Republican controlled areas. So it's no surprise, I guess, in that regard, that you're seeing Republicans demand things be reopened and Democrats demand things remain closed. But there is a very naive view of how the economy works. And it's many young people saying really stupid things on social media like, why doesn't the government just print more money? But it's not just about these dense urban populations. We have this protest, which I want to show you first. There's actually a lot going on. Just the other day, we heard that the governor of New Mexico, a Democrat, has shut down all roads leading to the town of Gallup due to a coronavirus outbreak. Recently, I actually just got back the other day driving across the country from the East Coast to the West Coast and back around 2,700 miles each direction. And in New Mexico, it was probably the craziest I had seen. There was already one town that had shut down completely to visitors. Now it looks like between certain hours, Gallup will be shut down as well. It's not a it's a very small town, actually. Not very big at all. It's not a big urban city. So we can see that there really is something tribal and partisan about how this lockdown is being handled. California being a blue state, we can see a Republican district, an area, is protesting. The weirdest thing of all of this is how the media has approached it. In South Dakota, the governor refused to lock things down. And all of a sudden, the media started popping up with these, South Dakota is the new hotspot, despite all of these new cases. South Dakota, oh man, what are they doing? And then nothing happened. I mean, look, some meat factories in South Dakota had shut down, but it really seems like the media was calling out South Dakota on purpose for not locking things down, even though South Dakota is not an outlier at all when tracking coronavirus numbers. So in the end, we can see something that's very obvious to most of us. The media is biased, but a very, very strange approach to how to deal with this thing. Now, look, South Dakota didn't lock down and everything has turned out fine so far. I mean, for the most part, many other states have it much worse. Like Utah has it worse than South Dakota. I'll pull up the numbers. So I want to take a look at what's going on because, look, initially, I saw this story about the protests and I thought it was really interesting to see thousands of people coming out being like, we're not going to remain locked down. And then to see the Democrats take this approach where in New York City, they're actually like hunting people down, chasing after funeral vehicles and arresting people, targeting the Jewish community. In this story we have from the Daily Mail, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio orders 1,000 cops to find people who gather to enjoy the weekend's warm weather. What? It's the weirdest thing. Now, I get it. New York City is the epicenter for basically the world right now. And it's partly their fault for encouraging people to go out when we already saw the warning signs. And I think it's fair to say we all, no one really knew what to expect. So I'll give them that much. And New York is ridiculously dense population-wise. So I'll tell you what, in some areas, I think it makes sense to have these kinds of lockdowns. But I think Bill de Blasio he's ignoring what he wants, doing what he wants. He went out and enjoyed the warm weather the other day. Why would he then order people to be fined? You see, it's rules for thee, but not for me. But let's take a look at what's going on with this protest first. There's a lot to get through, so maybe I can do my best and get through as much as I can. The Daily Mail says, thousands of anti-lockdown protesters stood off with mounted police Friday as they assembled on the boardwalk at Huntington Beach, angered by California Governor Gavin Newsom's order to close the beaches and called for an end to the coronavirus shutdown. Governor Newsom acted to close state and local beaches in Orange County to residents from Friday morning after disturbing images showed thousands flocking to the sands last weekend, ignoring the state's stay-at-home order because people don't care anymore. This is the craziest thing to me. Like, at what point do the Democrats realize what they're doing is unpopular? Look, I get it. The polls show most people think we should remain closed. Well, how do you respond to all of these people saying they don't care and going out and going to the beach? Well, they respond with an authoritarian lockdown, and in turn, you get mass protest. The rally was one of many held in at least 10 states across the U.S. on Friday in anger over the extended lockdowns. Thousands in cities including New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Raleigh, Columbus gathered at city halls and state houses to demand freedom after weeks of being forced to stay home. Yet the media would tell you it was only right-wingers and gun-toting extremists storming the Capitol in Michigan. No, I assure you that the surfer dudes are not staunch Republicans. They're wearing board shorts and like silly little sun hats or fishing hats. Yeah, they're regular people who live in these areas. They tend to be lefty. Now, you got to understand, a California Republican is different from like an Alabama Republican. A New Jersey Republican is fairly moderate. If you look at, look at Jeff Van Drew, switched. He actually ran as a Democrat before. When you have places in California protesting you, New York City and LA, it's not just right wingers. That's, of course, what they want to show you because it's the Democratic governors who are enforcing these authoritarian lockdowns. And maybe maybe it's just tribal. Maybe it's them saying, well, if the Democrats want it, I want to get reelected, so I'm going to do this. It could also be exploitation. Some people are concerned that the Democratic governors and other Democrats are trying to maintain a shutdown and the fear so they can push forward with mail-in voting, which would be pretty bad for Republicans. But let's read more. The closure announcement triggered criticism at Huntington Beach in particular, as between 2,500 and 3,000 people gathered a block from the beach Friday to voice their anger. Sheriff Don Barnes of Orange County said his department would not actively seek to arrest people on beaches, according to the LA Times, as protesters were seen being pushed back by a line of police on horses. Many who have been stuck inside for weeks criticized Newsom for policing the population and mocked him for trying to be an all-powerful leader as police on horseback kept the crowds in line. The crowds ignored social distancing guidelines and failed to wear masks. Most were seen carrying American flags as they led raucous chants in a much larger protest than the one gathered in the same area 2 weeks before. Here we can see a bunch of photos. And yes, many of them do seem to be Trump supporters and conservatives for sure. But I think it's fair to point out, if you've seen the videos, there are people who on the beaches getting arguing with cops and stuff. And they don't look like conservatives. I mean, look, conservatives can surf too, but I mean, they don't. I'm willing to bet you got a mixed bunch here. Probably leans right for a lot of obvious reasons, tribal reasons, but I'm willing to bet you got a mixed bunch. People saying open churches, we the people, etc. It's my right to work. Facts, not fear. Gadsden flags, open our beaches. Surfing is not a crime. Newsom is a kook. This is amazing. So we have a video here too. So look, you get it. There have been a bunch of protests going on, but here's what I want to show you. I want to show you something really weird. Governor closes all roads leading into New Mexico, grappling with coronavirus outbreak. It's a small town. I don't know, what do they say? 1,000 cases, has reported 1,000 positive cases of COVID-19, more than 30% of the state's total positive COVID cases. The spread of this virus in McKinley County is frightful, and it shows that physical distancing has not occurred and is not occurring. The virus is running amok there. It must be stopped, and stricter measures are necessary. All right. Are stricter measures necessary? Let's take a look at some news. The Washington Post, April 13th. South Dakota's governor resisted ordering people to stay home. Now it has one of the nation's largest coronavirus hotspots. Oh, heavens me. Okay, let's operate under the presumption that the Washington Post is correct. And on April 13th, South Dakota had one of the nation's largest hotspots. Put a pin in that. We'll get to it. Here's another story from NBC News. This one from April 15th. South Dakota Governor Noem, who opposed stay-home order, now faces coronavirus hotspot. The Republican under fire for not taking bolder action insists things are under control. Now, they say, NBC News on April 15th, that South Dakota was facing a hotspot. Again, put a pin in that because we're going to come back to this. The point I'm making now by showing you these stories. Here's one from April 15th. South Dakota Republican governor still refuses to order lockdown despite its Chinese-owned Smithfield meatpacking plant becoming the top coronavirus hotspot in America. And cases trebling to more than 1,000 a week. The top coronavirus hotspot in America. You heard it here from the Daily Mail. Well, it's been a couple weeks. Do you think the media and the tribalists are going to regret saying all of those things? The answer is yes, because the total hospitalizations for South Dakota is relatively low. Not the lowest in the country, but considering the media was going after the Republican governor, and considering now that according to Johns Hopkins University of Medicine, cumulative hospitalizations by state, South Dakota, 179 as of today. Hotspot, you say. But New Hampshire is worse. Utah is worse. Arkansas, Kansas, New Mexico, Oregon, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, Alabama, Minnesota, South Carolina, Tennessee, Arizona, Mississippi, Kentucky, Wisconsin, Colorado, Ohio, Virginia, Maryland. I could go on. Georgia, Florida, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and finally New York. You mean to tell me all of those states have more hospitalizations than South Dakota, but South Dakota on April 13th was the worst hotspot in the country, and she was refusing. So here, let's lay this out. The South Dakota governor refused to lock things down. The media attacked her, or elements of the media attacked her, saying that she was putting people at risk, that they were the worst in the nation, the meat processing plant are shutting down. Those aren't the only stories, mind you. Many of them have been popping up saying that things were getting bad and South Dakota was the worst. So if South Dakota was the worst on April 13th or 15th, it has now been over 2 weeks and she still hasn't locked down and other states are worse off. What does that say about lockdown measures? Now, one could argue it says nothing at all. You certainly couldn't argue that not locking, by having no lockdown, things would get worse because that didn't happen. You could also argue that it's irrelevant whether you lock down or not. Dare I say it? I actually think it shows the lockdowns make things worse. You know why? When people are in close proximity to each other, in close quarters, well, they have more opportunity to spread COVID, and especially considering they still have to go out to buy food. What ends up happening, at least I can say this is one presumption. I don't know what the likelihood of it is. I'm saying I actually think this is more likely than anything else. You have a household full of people, and they're minding their own business. Somebody's got to go to the store and pick up, the bread and milk. And they do. And they catch COVID. Because the one place everyone is still going, the store, to buy bread and milk and eggs. And so they come home and everyone's trapped in the house where you are much more likely to catch the infection. In the outdoors, the virus struggles to survive. In the outdoors, you have more space and you're less likely to come into contact with objects where there may be contamination. But inside, you have much less space, meaning somebody coughs, somebody talks, the moisture, the particles, they go on the wall a few feet in front of you, and then you walk by later, brush it, maybe don't realize, and you catch this. Perhaps because there was no stay-at-home order, more people in South Dakota were going outside, and thus less likely to catch the coronavirus. Maybe not, I don't know. All I can tell you is this, definitively. The media screamed and was spitting and yowling, saying that this was the worst they had seen. And it was the worst hotspot in America. And now 2 weeks on, with no change, they are nowhere near the worst in the nation. Now, you could argue they've got more cases or something. I went by hospitalizations for a reason. You can argue South Dakota isn't testing enough. So I went by hospitalizations. How many people in South Dakota needed to go to the hospital because of COVID? 179. Many other states with lockdowns are doing much worse. I guess the only fair conclusion is we must lean towards the lockdowns are actually causing more harm than good in more ways than one. Unfortunately, you still get a bunch of really dumb people pushing really dumb ideas. But check this out. In South Dakota, we never closed down, but doctors like me wish we would. Why? You're like number 27 or 8 in terms of COVID hospitalizations. Nothing bad has happened for the most part in the past 2 weeks. I get it. The food plants have shut down. Donald Trump has issued a mandate to reopen these things. But isn't it a little strange? What is this op-ed from the Washington Post? When was this written? April 27th. You wish we would. The coronavirus is here and we may not be ready for it. Yet 2 weeks on, nothing. Look, I think the coronavirus is really bad. I think the lockdown orders made sense at the time. And I think now we're starting to realize this cure may actually have, it may have outstayed its welcome. It made sense for a short period. We flattened the curve. We're seeing it even in New York. Doesn't it now make sense to slowly start reopening things? I'd say so. But for some reason, you still see people saying no. Well, I'll tell you what. Now what do we get? On April 28th, they held a parade for their Republican governor. You folks made my day. South Dakota governor thrown parade after rejecting coronavirus lockdown. They were proven right. What more do you want? Let me throw it to this beautiful viral meme that has been going around for a while to explain the problem with the ongoing shutdown. Now, first and foremost, we got to take this thing seriously. We are seeing many people lose their lives. Pay attention to it. But I think now, even in the media, the facade is starting to break. And I'm not trying to pretend like this thing was a hoax or anything. Absolutely not. That's silly. What I do think we're seeing is that the projections seem to have been very overestimated. The social lockdown, you can easily just say, worked like a charm. But at this point, it's not doing anything for us. At this point, it may make more sense now to slowly start reopening things. But but instead of, getting into the nitty gritty of, what should we have done? Hindsight is 2020, man. I think we saw a problem, we didn't understand, and we said better safe than sorry, especially looking at Italy when the army came in to carry out bodies. And we're still seeing mass graves dug in other countries and even in New York City. So I think locking down made sense for the time it did. Now, for many reasons, we need to slowly start reopening. Now, of course, I think it's still possible that in places like New York, if they ease up, on the restrictions, you will see many, many more cases and it can be devastating. But the devastation to the economy is now reaching critical mass. And people aren't sitting still. If the government loses the confidence of the people, it will get a lot worse. But I bring you now to the silly, naive socialist view. Why, friends, this is called late stage capitalism. It is a subreddit mocking capitalism, but it's become a caricature of what it's supposed to be. You absolutely can mock capitalism, talking about silly things where, we just make jobs for the sake of having jobs so that someone could get access to money. I mean, socialists have the same problem. But there are things you can mock in capitalism. Laissez-faire capitalism, I'm not a big fan. Socialism, not a big fan either. I think we need a little bit of both. But take a look at this post that's been going viral. This woman says, y'all really would rather reopen the country and kill millions instead of just demanding a debt rent freeze and temporary UBI till we're in the clear? Y'all simping so hard for capitalism, you're protesting to let your nana, peepaw, and all your compromised friends die so you can return to your SE middle management corporate job like some beta cuck for the oligarchs. Lil Dick energy, she says. This is what they really think. This is a problem with an uneducated country. This is why journalism is so important and why getting people access to good information is so important. Unfortunately, they don't. These people just, maybe it's just because people want to be in tribes. They don't really care about what is or isn't. I don't care about your tribe. I don't care about, Trump saying liberate. I'm talking about what's practical. Here we can see that South Dakota didn't lock down and they're doing aight. Okay, let me explain something to you. You can't just print money and then freeze everything and think people will be able to eat, because the people who make the food you eat have to also get paid, also pay rent, also pay taxes. It's like they don't understand the concept of production. Yet this is the late stage capitalism subreddit where they're talking about Karl Marx and presumably are socialists. I don't want to accuse them all of being socialists because I think it's fair to mock late stage capitalism whether you're a socialist or not. You can be for mixed economies and some regulation. Simping so hard for capitalism. Protesting to let your nana, peepaw, and compromised friends die. Of course they're not, you morons. You know what? It's kids, man. It's the scary thing is the people who never grow up. And it's kind of like, I wonder if it's kind of, when I was on the Joe Rogan podcast, we were talking about aliens and stuff and about the domestication of humans I brought up. That wolves are fiercely, they hunt in the pack. They're more independent. They know where their place is in the hierarchy, things like that. But then dogs are like perpetual baby wolves. We've bred them to be that way. And I wonder if there's some similarity here where these people are just everything is provided to me always. I just sit here and, wag my tail and someone puts the food bowl in front of me. Is that what you think? The dog, it really does remind me of this dynamic where it's the dog has no idea where the food comes from. All the dog knows is that you walk in, you put the food down, and the dog gets to eat. Whereas the wolf, the hunter, knows you have to go and get the food or you don't eat. So I view this as kind of pure privilege. Domestication is an analogy. I'm not saying literally they're domesticated people. I'm saying when you grow up in a big city and everything is just there and you have no idea how the system works, you're naturally just people are so dumb. The government will just give you money and then you'll have food. It's and where does the food come from? Oh, I don't know, the store? And where does the food in the store come from? What do you mean? Well, who brings the food to the store? It comes on a truck. Where does that come from? I don't know, a food plant. And where do they get the materials to make the food? These people have no idea how this stuff works, do they? The longer we're shut down, the more we risk starvation. But they don't read the news. The UN has warned us 130 million people are going to starve unless we reopen things. So yeah, I think the lockdown did what it needed to do. And now we have no choice but to get back to work. Instead, what's going on in California? Oh, I'm going to lock things down. What's happening in Michigan? The state legislator says we're not extending the lockdown. And Governor Whitmer goes, I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah, at a certain point, you have to say, no, you're insane. You're tyrannical. This is the reason we have the system we do. Because when an anti-science moron like Governor Whitmer ignores the warnings from the UN, ignores the data from the CDC and Johns Hopkins, and then says, we just must remain locked down because we're scared, that's anti-science. And now you've got some dictatorial moron locking things down, risking everyone's lives because she's a tribalist dictator. I don't know. Whatever you want to call it. The best part about it is they don't realize it. Elon Musk tweeted, freedom, liberate, all the stuff. And now what do we get on Reddit? They're all like, he's so anti-science. Why would he pay attention to the science? Like, dude, you're not even reading the updates from Johns Hopkins University. The CDC is you're not even looking at the studies that have come out showing the mortality rate is lower. We have the science. You're just ignoring it. Yeah, I'm not surprised, though. The people who tend to think that there's infinite number of genders don't understand science and then think they're the ones on the side of science. They're not. I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. at youtube.com/Timcast. That is my main channel, and I will see you all then.